Okay. Okay, I think we are live. Okay. Go live. MBLM. Okay. Okay, looks like we're live. Give it a minute. Okay, looks like we're live. Okay, cool. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kevin Olicle, and I will be moderating today's panel. As you may know, Malayalees for Black Lives Matter has been hosting regular panels and discussions around different issues centering the BLM movement and how we as Malayalees can be better allies to the movement. And today's panel is no different. The purpose of this panel is to discuss why legislative action is so critical to a movement like Black Lives Matter. True change is only achieved when we put reform into law, and we are incredibly grateful and lucky to have 3 young elected officials here today to help us understand how we can support them in their efforts to create real change in a very broken system. And so I'd like to start by introducing our 3 panelists today. We are joined by Illinois State Senator Robert Peters. Robert Peters took office in 2019, representing the Illinois 13th District in the city of Chicago. In his first term, Senator Peters was the chief co-sponsor of 13 bills that were signed into law, including legislation on banning private civil detention centers, ending pay-to-stay practices in correctional facilities, expanding access to SNAP benefits, preventative HIV treatment, and apprenticeships for youth. Prior to his time in office, Senator Peters worked as an organizer where he was able to successfully fight to require Cook County judges to set affordable bail amounts for defendants, leading to a substantial reduction in the Cook County jail population. Thank you, Senator Peters, for joining us. We also have Senator Ram Vilivalam, who's here today. Ram Vilivalam was elected in 2018 to represent the 8th District in Illinois, which includes parts of the city of Chicago and northern suburbs, becoming the first Indian American elected to serve the Illinois General Assembly. He currently serves as chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee and is focused on issues such as income inequality, reducing gun violence, providing a quality education to children regardless of their zip code, and advancing both women's and LGBTQ rights. And prior to joining the Senate, Ram Vilivalam was the political director for Congressman Brad Schnieder and served as legislative coordinator for SEIU Healthcare, advocating for healthcare workers across the state. Thank you for joining us. And finally, we have Senator Kevin Thomas. Kevin Thomas was elected in 2018 to represent the 6th District in Nassau County, becoming the first Indian American in New York history to serve in the state Senate. Senator Thomas currently serves as chairman of the Consumer Protection Committee, where he has successfully championed legislation to protect consumers' rights, consumers' private information from exploitation, expand economic opportunities for Long Island families, and combat the growing student loan debt crisis. Prior to his election, Senator Thomas worked as an attorney and served as an appointee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights to the New York State Advisory Committee. Thank you all for joining us today. So I will jump right into our questions for our panelists. So I'll start with Senator Peters. Senator Peters, you have laid out some of your priorities as a legislator. You have called on more budget allocation to mental health services, ending cash bail. Can you speak to some of your legislative priorities and your own experiences that have motivated you to make these issues a priority?
Yeah, I mean, I have a few priorities that date back sort of before the current. First of all, let me say thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this discussion. I think we're in a real moment to create some real change. And so when we look at, the world that we're in right now, we're in the midst of three crises, a pandemic, public health crisis, an economic crisis, and a crisis when it comes to racism within law enforcement. And so a lot of the fights that have been that are coming up now have been happening for years. For instance, cash bail, moving away from a sort of police response to mental health and behavioral health crises to, someone who's, like a social worker or a guidance counselor or someone who's just in the mental health field to help people get through it. So these are big passions I had before we entered into this crisis. And I think we have a real unique opportunity to start moving away from a sort of carceral vision and carceral policy regime to something that actually uplifts people so that they're not guilty of being poor, like what we see when it comes to pretrial detention, or if they're going through a mental health or behavioral health issue, that they get the treatment and the love that they deserve and that they need. And then combine that with the fact that we can get people out of our prison system who are there because of laws called truth in sentencing laws. That means that people are stuck in prison even though they've already served their time. If we can reduce that or get rid of them so people can come home and get the housing and the health care that they deserve, this is something that I think we can get done this year. I have a lot of optimism around that. And the reason why I care so much about them sort of dates back to 1985. I was born deaf with a speech impediment. My biological mom was addicted to drugs and alcohol. This is in the midst of Ronald Reagan's war on drugs. I was forced into adoption. I was adopted by a civil rights lawyer for a father and a social worker for a mom. Most of my dad's work was suing the police for police brutality. He's taken his cases to the Supreme Court. And so for me, it's a personal issue. One part my birth, one part my upbringing. And it's been, it's a core part of my DNA. And it's something that I feel like I'm going to have to fight for, not just now, but, for the future. And to even, sort of take this even further, the role I play is not just to fight for this and just try to skate by and sit in the seat, but to say, what are the risks that I take that pushes the boundaries personal issue of what safety and justice is in our communities. And so I think we have an opportunity, after looking at the last 30 to 40 years of tough on crime policy, to reimagine safety and justice, to lift up people, invest in people, and sort of reimagine what community looks like in the 21st century.
Thank you. And Senator Villivalam, you have supported legislation around tackling medical bias training and repealing the incarceration cost reimbursement. Can you speak to some of your own legislative priorities and your also your own experiences that have motivated you to make these issues a priority?
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Kevin, for having me to be a part of this conversation. And I'm so proud of the Malayale Indian American community stepping up and really making their voices heard and banding together to create Malayalees for Black Lives Matter. I think it means a lot. It says something that you all have organized and are making a statement and are trying to be the best allies that you can be. I share a lot of the priorities, that the senator had just mentioned. You mentioned, before, when I ran largely on a platform of income inequality. And I think that's particularly relevant given the framing that Senator Peters mentioned in terms of the three different crises that we're facing, given the solutions that we're looking at to address these crises, right? One is regarding the pandemic. We have to overhaul our healthcare system. We have to ensure that our public health departments have the resources they need to be able to respond to the issues that are taking place. We need to do so equitably. There's no question that there are healthcare disparities as it relates to Black and Brown communities, including Indian Americans, but especially African Americans and Latinos. And the second crisis in terms of what took place for Mr. Floyd and others, Breonna Taylor and so forth, is not just about one incident or 20 incidents over the last 5 years that people have, that at least have been reported on. It's about systemic racism. It's about the disinvestment that's taken place in communities of color that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs and so much more. And so when we talk about income inequality, it's more than just two words. It's, you know, raising the minimum wage, which we did in Illinois to $15 an hour. It's passing legislation that would change our tax system to make sure that billionaires and millionaires pay their fair share. That's on the ballot in November in terms of a graduated income tax. Illinois is one of 5 states that has a flat income tax in our Constitution. And it's putting those resources from those taxes, from the wages that people receive into the communities that we're talking about. And that's how you get the robust public education that is needed in those communities. That's how you start to do some of the things that Senator Peters outlined in terms of mental health services, in terms of reallocating some of the resources and responsibilities of a police department to say, hey, if there's a homeless person on a bench in a park, how about we send someone from the city that can provide them a list of services that are available, he or she, and get them to a shelter that night, make sure they have access to a warm breakfast in the morning, instead of sending 4 police officers and 2 squad cars. So that's how we, you know, as Senator Peters says, we reimagine safety. But I go back to how we get there, and what I ran on and what I believe in is we need to readjust our economy and our financial system. And that starts with taxing billionaires and millionaires. That starts with making sure there's the same set of rules for Wall Street as there is Main Street. And I think that's how you get those resources. I'll just add, as the first Asian American elected to the Illinois State Senate, the first Indian American elected to the Illinois General Assembly, I also think that it's incumbent on our community, and again, why I'm proud of this group, to be responsible and proactive allies during this time. And that's what I've tried to be. Look, Donald Trump wants to divide and conquer. That's his whole strategy. That is what he's about. That's what many people that part of the Republican Party are about. And that's where we lose, when we start pitting one community versus another. And I'm firmly against that. I stand with the African American community, and I'm proud to follow Senator Peters' lead and others on what's happening right now.
Thank you, Senator. And this question, same question to Senator Kevin Thomas. Senator, you have, in the Senate, you were part of the legislature that was able to pass historic reforms such as banning the chokehold and the repealing of 50A. So can you speak to your own legislative priorities, the work you did to pass those landmark bills, and what's motivated you through your own experiences to make these issues a priority?
Thank you, Kevin. Let me start off by giving you a little bit of background about myself. Prior to getting into politics, I used to work for the NYPD. This is through college, and after law school, I entered my legal services career, where I took care of indigent clients when they get sued over consumer debt. I was later appointed by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights to the New York State Advisory Committee. And one of the things that we did in that committee was to investigate and report on what the NYPD does in terms of over-policing with stop and frisk. All right. And there was a set of recommendations that we pushed out, which included the repeal of 50A, as well as several other recommendations. So when the protests started all across the country, and New York was the quickest to take action, because We've had a number of investigations. We've had a number of hearings about this already, and it was ready. The stars had aligned. Unfortunately, on the backs of so many individuals that passed away because of police brutality. And we were able to have a consensus in both houses. Those were our priorities. And let me go through the bills that we were able to pass. Number one, disclosure of police disciplinary records. That's the repeal of 50A, which made personal records of police officers confidential and now subject to inspection or review without consent of the officer or mandated by court order. We were able to also pass the Eric Garner Anti-Chokehold Act, right? This bill was introduced in response to the 2014 death of a New York resident named Eric Garner. You've probably heard of it, by a police officer. While chokeholds were and currently prohibited in New York City under the patrol guide, this law now makes it a crime to engage in one as a police officer throughout the state of New York. Now we've also passed legislation that would create a special prosecutor for police-involved deaths. We've also passed bills about reporting when your gun has been discharged. We've passed a bill that basically provides people under arrest with medical attention. We've also passed a bill to allow for individuals to record the police who are not under arrest. And we've also passed a number of other, laws that would keep police accountable. And this is not based off of one incident, but it's based off of a collective several. Like, we've seen so much going on that we had to act. And this is based off of my experience as someone who worked in law enforcement, who then flipped and worked as a civil rights attorney, and now sitting as a legislator. Everything came into play here when I made my decision to vote yes on all of those bills and pass the legislation to keep police accountable.
Thank you, Senators, for your response to that question. I want to go back to Senator Peters. Senator, many people feel that this moment is very different, that we have a chance for real reform, and all of you have highlighted some of your accomplishments recently. Do you feel, from a legislator's perspective, do you think that we will continue to see substantial reform? Have you seen legislators that you never thought you might even be able to work with start to move on some of these issues, and should we be optimistic?
Yeah, that's a big question. So I really appreciate you, Kevin, for giving me such a giant question that I'll try to answer. So I'll start with the last one as the first one. I think that there is this belief, and I think that the Trump administration is trying to do this, which is to pit the suburbs and downstate Illinois versus Chicago. And I think, to use my harsh language I tend to do, that's bullshit and it's bad. When we look at when the George Floyd tape came out, and everyone saw the video of him getting murdered, there were there's a small town in central southern Illinois called Carlinville that had 1,000 people come out to declare Black Lives Matter. We saw in Naperville and in Joliet, thousands of people come out. We saw in Chicago, not just, in my part of town, which is along the lakefront on the south side, but stretching from the Gold Coast to downtown down to the Indiana border, but actually in a heavily cop area in the northwest side of Chicago, 1,000 people came out to say Black Lives Matter. So I think we actually have a unique opportunity to move and break beyond this sort of divide to get something done. I do think that if we're not bold, we will miss this opportunity. Like, we're in a period that it's very similar to get really analytical for people that's similar to, you know, the early 1970s, when it was, you know, sort of a shift economically and socially, 1972 recession, to be really exact. We're in that moment. And so if we actually miss that boat, I think it's actually very dangerous. So for me, it is important that we're as bold as possible, that we continue to be bold, that it is clearly a moment that where folks, whether they're in central Illinois, the suburbs, or in the city, are united in declaring Black Lives Matter. And I think it is on us, you know, particularly myself, who was an organizer before I was the state senator, to shift the plane, to, you know, put a flag in the ground and say, this is the new point for justice. So yeah, I think we are in a moment where we can get some really great stuff done. Things that people said were impossible years ago that have become possible now. You know, it's to remind people that 4 years ago, the term Black Lives Matter was actually intimidating. You know, politicians were like, I don't want to go near that. And here we are, where it's almost like just expected. You know, it's like a thing that you're supposed to say. So I think it is on us to continue to push those boundaries while we're in this moment, and to be clear that in order for us to actually get through this public health crisis, this economic crisis, and this crisis when it comes to racism, in order for us to get through it, we need to actually put out those bold demands and tie them to the material well-being of people. So it's not just the fact that we need, you know, Senator Villivalam said this earlier, it's not just that we need to see criminal justice reform. We need that paired by strengthening the economy, in making sure that those who do not have it, you know, those who are, you know, working class, have the resources that they need across the board. And so if we pair that together, we create real safe communities. And in all honesty, we have an opportunity to make Chicago and Illinois whole. And so, yeah, I think we have a chance here to get something done, and I'm really excited. And, you know, the more people can get involved and the more that they can make demands. The one thing I'll say about a politician, as a politician, is that we actually hate getting so many demands, because it puts us under pressure. And so what I will say to people is keep putting us under pressure.
Thank you, Senator. You mentioned about, you know, it sounds like, you know, we, in order to capitalize on this moment, we definitely need to build a broad coalition and bring more people into the fold. And so a question to Senator Villivalam, Senator Thomas, specifically for our South Asian community, how do you think, as South Asian legislators, how do we build that coalition within our community?
Well, I can start, if you don't mind, Senator Thomas, and just say a couple of items. One is, look, we need to have a set agenda, a set group of principles in terms of being staunch allies. And I think part of that is making sure that we're listening and understanding people in the Black community as they speak about the injustices, the challenges, and the opportunities they see for their communities. I think part of that is educating ourselves and not putting it on the Black community, all in the Black community, to educate us, right? It's a combination. I think that it's, again, putting together a list, you know, and I think it starts with legislation. I think that's how you fundamentally change policy that's going to be long lasting and spread across the communities. I apologize. You see my son in here. There you go. That's okay. Well, hang on here. Hold me. All right. So this is Rohan, everybody. He just burst into a room that was supposed to have a child lock on it. So there goes that. That's what you get when he's 98 percentile height and weight. But creating that list, right? And I think, look, it's more than putting up a Black Lives Matter sign. It's more than showing up at a protest. That's great, and I think that's appreciated, but it can't be that. It can't just be that. It has to be supporting legislation that's going to fundamentally change how what happens in those communities, whether that's criminal justice reform, whether that's making sure that resources and investments take place in those communities. both of those items and more are how I think we can fundamentally change and help change the communities. I'll also say it's about having those difficult conversations, with people in our community. People, some people would generally say that it's mostly folks that are of the older generation that may have a different view of Black Lives Matter and systemic racism. I think, some of that might be true, but there are also folks that are in the younger generation that, may not completely understand and are not educated as to why there's such a disparity in how Black folks how they've been in this country and how they're treated in this country. And so, it's about time that we have that conversation with our parents, with our uncles, with our aunts, with our cousins, and be intentional about it and say, look, I believe that Black Lives Matter, and here's why. And I think you should too. And I think, the last part I'll say is, there's some education that needs to be done on how our struggle was connected to their struggle, and make sure people understand the history of make sure people understand the history of how what we've achieved and the rights that we have been now guaranteed, they stem from Black civil rights leaders and the Black community and Latino communities struggling alongside us and achieving those victories and those laws. And so I think that's what I would say in terms of what our community can do and should do.
Thank you, Senator Villivalam. Senator Thomas, did you have anything to add there?
Yes. So here's the thing, right? I believe we are living through the second civil rights movement. And as Malayalees, as South Asians, we've benefited from the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, they all marched and fought for people that they haven't met, including us. And after the Civil Rights Act was passed, there are a number of changes to immigration laws that allowed us, South Asians, Indian Americans, Malayalees, to come to this country. We are a beneficiary of the civil rights movement. And we owe it to the African American community to stand up for them. All right? We need to do that. I know there's a lot of talk with our older generation about, marching and fighting for them, but they need to understand they wouldn't be living in the home that they're living in. They wouldn't be able to get the job that they have. They wouldn't have been able to send the kids to the schools that they go to if it wasn't for the sacrifices of African Americans. That's what they need to know. I live in Levittown, all right? This is America's first suburb. So back in the day, in order to buy a home here, you would have to be white. And now I represent this area, and it's with great pride I say that. But things need to change. Things need to change. But we need to stick together. I've heard from senators in Illinois about, passing legislation, but legislation alone will not actually correct the situation. You have to change people's hearts. And that's going to take time. Nothing's going to basically change overnight. But through these marches, through legislation, through education, behavior will change. And when behavior changes, hearts change. And that's what we should strive to do here. All right? Us as South Asians, us as Malayalees, we need to stand together with our brethren in the African American community.
Thank you, Senator.
Kevin, I just wanted to just add real quick that I couldn't agree with Senator Thomas. I very much view this as the analogy that I use is the pay it forward analogy. If you, as a person, you talk to three people, and then those three people talk to three people. I mean, that's how we have to approach it. And I couldn't agree more. It's both legislation and the movement side of this that both other senators have spoken about.
Thank you. So the other thing that we wanted to talk about, the part of the focus of this panel is also we understand that we have to educate our community. We have to fight a lot of the stigma. We really want to be able to talk about like the actions we can take electorally to really move the movement, and so move the movement forward. And so the question I want to ask you is, why should people start paying attention to their local and state governments? And why should they start participating in their local politics if they want to be true supporters and allies to the BLM movement? I'll ask that to Senator Peters.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I could give both the academic answer and then like the movement answer. So I think the first part on an academic level is that the way that power works in this country is it's actually a lot within the local and state context. So though we don't have the ability to print money, that's a federal thing, the way our system works and how our laws are implemented and how they impact your life comes from that local office as well as that state elected official. And so if we want to be able to impact any change, it's not just at the presidential level, but it's down at that local elected official level. So I implore people to understand, the first part of, learning about that your local elected official. Second part, knowing that, most of us aren't just some sort of like, genius who's doing this. We are people too, and that you can learn this. It seems like it's far away or it's distant from you, but you can actually learn to be part of it and to use as an opportunity as you learn about local elected office and how much it can impact your life. And we're talking about, in Illinois, we just passed a capital bill, an infrastructure bill that's going to impact people's roads and public transportation, their schools. The more you learn about that, to get involved. And so that's sort of that first part of why, like on an academic level, of how much we actually impact your life and the laws that we make. We're talking about jobs, and we're talking about taxation, and we're talking about where that money is going and who gets that money in a way that is far more accessible than it comes at the federal level. The other part is when we're talking about sort of the Black Lives Matter movement or the movement for Black lives, the federal government can do a lot. But the way we've set this up is actually at the local and state level. Incarceration is not actually, ballooning when it comes to federal prison. Where incarceration is at its worst is actually at state prisons. So state elected officials play an outsized role in reducing incarceration rates at the state level. When it comes to police and police accountability, a local elected official, local police departments, as well as like just, local laws can make the biggest impact when it comes to policing. So what we want to do, if we want to reduce incarceration, is reduce the likelihood that someone's going to have to be met with the police. And so where that comes is at the local level as much, and as well as the state level, but those two over the federal level, over the president. There's a larger conversation to say that the incentive that comes to the national level can incentivize financially states and local governments to do something. That's a big part of the famous 1994 crime bill. But the idea is when it comes to the implementation of that, when it comes to the accountability of that, that is a local and state level issue. I'll give an example. In my district, there's been a lot of complaints about noise. There's been a lot of noise complaints, and right now we have two folks who are competing with each other. One is saying we need to call the cops more, right? They want to talk to a local city council member to call the cops on these noise complaints. And another person said, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's the right idea. And my statement to the people, I tend to agree with the people who say don't need to call the cops. my statement to them is to break down what could happen to that person who interacts with the police over a noise complaint. And I'll wrap it up here in a second. I'll go on and on, but I'll wrap it up here. The idea is that you call the cops on someone in a noise complaint, then all of a sudden, they get arrested over a noise complaint. They get stacked on charges. Maybe they were drinking, maybe they were, publicly consuming cannabis or weed. Then they go to jail. They can't afford bail. They're there for 3 days. They lose their job. Maybe they lose their family. They might lose their housing. They might just really be screwed. So now it went from a noise complaint to them actually having their life unravel. They come back. They have no other option. So what do? They're going to get involved in more criminal activity after, 2 or 3 days in jail. And then what's going to happen is the same person who was mad about the noise complaint is going to come up to me and say, I can't believe this person's committing carjacking. And I'm going to say, well, if we didn't send this person to jail for the noise complaint, we wouldn't have started the cycle in the first place. And where we make those impacts, where we make those changes in that entire cycle is local and state level laws. Those aren't coming from the president or Congress in this instance. Those are coming from decisions made at a far more local level. And so it is important for us to have the right people in local office who understand that, the laws that they're making could disrupt so many people's lives and just create a bad cycle. So I hope this is a good selling point for why your local and state elected officials and offices are so important, and that they are one of the most accessible offices for people.
Thank you, Senator. Senators Villivalam, Thomas, do you guys have anything to add?
Well, I'll be real quick because I couldn't agree more with the comments that Senator Peters made about the importance of local and state government, including the vicious cycle, the example that he just gave. I'll just say this, the federal government with a divided Congress and divided government in terms of the Republican White House and Democratic House especially, it takes some time. It takes some time to negotiate and debate all of these issues. And look, we've seen this on this issue. Republican Senator Tim Scott and his Republican colleagues introduced a bill, and it didn't have enough support because their Democratic colleagues in the Senate said it didn't go far enough. And so they're at a standstill now. And the reality of the situation is, given the Black Lives Movement and the decades and centuries really of disparities and systemic racism and so forth, we can't wait. We just can't wait. And so when there's an opportunity at the state level or the local level to move and to pass local or state legislation into law to address this challenge in every way they can, we need to do it. And that's it. That's the bottom line. And, I'm proud to be from the state of Illinois. We had a rough couple of years under Republican Governor Bruce Rauner. But last year, we passed 599 pieces of legislation through both chambers. And the governor signed 95% of those pieces of legislation. So we're able to get things done, ranging from gun violence prevention to reforming our tax code and addressing the severe need to fund public education, and the list goes on. And so, I would just say, reach out to your local legislator. Usually they're accessible, and make your demands, because the reality is, I truly believe that we can't wait. And I do believe that there is an easier path to getting things done, especially as it relates to what's happening right now in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement and systemic racism at the state and local level.
And related to the point about local and state government, the importance of these elections, Senator Kevin Thomas, my question is, a lot of people live in states that aren't considered swing states this upcoming November. Can you maybe elaborate as to why it's still really important to get out and vote in this upcoming general election?
Yes, absolutely. Listen, the point about voting, a lot of individuals think that their vote does not count. They need to understand that they cannot live away from politics. We are all part of the policy making that legislators do. All right, whether you are a doctor, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're an engineer, whether any profession, politics is involved. Legislators make the rules that allow you to do whatever it is that you need to do. If you're, taking public transportation, you're driving your car on a road, it all matters because your vote picks an individual that will make the decisions for you. And you need to pick individuals that have empathy, that can connect with you. Not every candidate is, the perfect candidate. But what you need to look for is an individual who will sit there and listen to you. When you ask them, why are there potholes on the road? Instead of actually saying it's about the weather, you pick up the phone and you call the county government and say, there's a pothole there and you need to fill it. You need those kind of individuals. Someone who will listen and someone who will act. Even though you don't live in a swing state. Remember, your local politics governs your day-to-day life. And we as South Asians need to understand that. I've said this, throughout my circuit. Us as South Asians, we sit quiet when it comes to politics. We are the best educated. We are a growing minority group. We have businesses everywhere. But when it comes to pushing forward policies that we care about, we sit silent until something bad happens, and then we are up in arms. We need to go out, register to vote, and vote, because our voice matters. And no matter what you think, you are staying away from politics, you are in politics because you live here in this neighborhood, in this city, in this town, in this state. All right, with that, I just want to say I have another event that I need to go to over on Zoom. Love you all, God bless, and this is a great program, all right?
Thank you, Senator Thomas. We're closing in, or we got about 15 minutes left. We're going to be cognizant of your time, and just kind of wanted to focus in on a little bit of what actions can we take as an organization, as individuals. So, as legislators, what would you ask us as voters, as constituents, as residents? How can we be most effective to help you create change? So I'll go to Senator Peters. I know you have an organizing background. So if you can touch on that and help us, help us figure out the best way to help you guys.
Yeah, so I'll do it in sort of a sort of stage, sort of some stages. The first one I think is to learn, to educate on the issue. Recently I grew up in a white Irish Catholic family, but I'm, Black. And so I get, my family will reach out to me and say, I'm reading this book, White Fragility. I said, well, I don't want you reading that book. I was like, please stop, please stop. I think the idea is to get the right education. And I think the movement for Black Lives has been doing a great job in providing the resources for people to learn from and to be challenged. I think it's important to be challenged, important to be challenged by the dominant narratives we've been told. My Irish Catholic family always believed that they got somewhere because they picked themselves up by some bootstraps. And I always remind them the reason why they left Cork, Ireland, was because the English were stealing all the crops from Irish farmers, and they were left with potatoes. And then when the potatoes went bad, they were blamed. The Irish were blamed for their own for their own pain, and they were told to go somewhere else, and they chose to come to a country in the middle of a civil war to get out from English settler colonialism to come here. So I always remind my family that, because it also makes me laugh, because I'm, the adopted one who's not born Irish, talking to him about Irish history, but also knowing the fact of where we come from. And so there's that part, is learning that history and being rooted in it, and knowing that when it comes to anything involving justice, it's going to require a little tension, a little twist in the stomach that makes us question ourselves and what we've been told, and to lean into it. So that's the first part. The second part is to know that you do not go through what you're learning by yourself. Do it in solidarity and in concert with other organizations and groups who they themselves are going through varying degrees of pain and suffering. That might be Black folks, right? It might be South Asian folks. It might be folks from, Mexico or Guatemala, Latinx folks. So I think the idea is to be there and to know that we are in this fight together. So education and organizing and working together and being part of those organizations that are doing that work, and know that in order for us to all be able to experience freedom, to be relieved from the anxiety and the stress that we are all going through right now, that the only way we can lift that is lift that together. So that's one, and that's two. The other part is there are things that are happening throughout the country. Senator Villivalam, just put in the chat here, you can't see it, about in Florida, there was a referendum. And a good friend of mine, Desmond Meade, was this big organizer. He came out of prison, and he learned that he could not vote because he was a felon. So he created this referendum, and he thought he passed it, right, which would have allowed people coming out of prison the ability to vote. But instead, the Republicans there basically recreated a Jim Crow poll tax. There are campaigns like this happening from Florida to New York. Here in Illinois, for instance, I talked about abolishing cash bail. In California, there's a huge fight to ban private detention centers, something that we've done here. There are these fights happening across the justice system that impact us and impact other folks, and for folks to get involved in them. And I would say, if you want to learn so much about your local politics, so that means your local elected official at the city or the state level, is to find that politician on the local level who is fighting back against this injustice, and say, how can I help? How can I learn? And how can I grow this movement? So my one suggestion to folks as this is happening is to learn, to push yourself, and to get involved, and to say, what is the risks I need to take? The risks that undermine the things I've been told so long. Things that, if the equivalent for me is telling my uncle about the fact that the Irish didn't just plop over into the United States of America, they were pushed. And for us to push ourselves so that if the last 30 to 40 years was about tough on crime, about bootstraps and picking yourself up by something that may not exist, the next 30 to 40 years is the fact that you truly are relieved and free from the anxiety and stresses that we are going through right now.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Villivalam, did you have any other thoughts to add?
Well, I'll go back to some of the comments that I made to reiterate. Obviously, I agree with Senator Peters, but I would go back to a couple things. One is get yourself educated and also listen, right? It's a combination of both. Making sure you're listening to the African American community and their leaders in terms of what is happening, what is needed, not questioning them, right? Listening and believing them, and also getting yourself educated, on the issue and the backstory, right? A lot of people in our community don't know that the rights that we have been guaranteed came from the Civil Rights Movement, the Voting Rights Act, and so much more. And so I think it's listen and get educated. I think it's also doing what you can personally. Do your research, support organizations that are leading in this movement. Brave Space Alliance is one. There's so many others. Not all of us can do everything, right? We have to remember this is a marathon, not a sprint. We can't, I said that, when Donald Trump got elected, there's a march for everything because he's terrible on everything. whether it's women's rights, LGBTQ rights, a science march, and the list goes on. This is a similar situation where we need to make sure that this is a sustained effort to end systemic racism, to end the injustices that are taking place in Black and brown communities, and so forth. So I would do your research, support organizations that are doing this work, support the communities, support their food pantries, support Black-owned businesses. There's a number of things that you can do personally, whether it's once a week, once a month, whatever it is. It's going to make a difference, because these are communities that have been continually disinvested in and have been disproportionately impacted by so much. And then lastly, put your money and your voice where your mouth is. If you're going to put up a Black Lives Matter sign, if you are going to attend a protest, if you are going to be a part of Malayalees for Black Lives Matter, I appreciate that. I think that's great. I think it's an important step. But when the time comes to advocate for legislation and to invest in those communities, we need everybody to step up and contact their legislator and make sure that we get the job done. And that means that you might get asked, well, if that community receives more funding, look, our Black Caucus, Legislative Caucus, has called for $1 billion in investment in Chicago's and the entire state's Black communities. And, so some people in my district and my community might say, well, if they get that, why can't we get that amount? Or are we going to get less? And the reality is having that tough conversation to say, look, we're talking about a centuries, decades full of disinvestment and disparities. Those communities need the investment, period. And the argument that I make is a rising tide lifts all ships. And so what happens on the south and west sides of Chicago does impact my district, which is on the northwest side of Chicago and the northwest suburbs, because we need to all be in this together. And so I would say those are a few action items that I've taken, that I've encouraged others to take. And again, I'm just glad that we're having this conversation and that you all have started this group.
Yeah, so I wanted to address like a thing that I think people will bring up because it's part of like the American sort of psyche, especially amongst some more reactionary white folks, which is the statement of what about Black on Black crime, which I think happens, and people will talk to other people and they'll say that. And I want folks to know that that is one ridiculous thing to have asked, right? The idea here is, if we're talking about something systemic, we're talking about an actual broken system. First of all, it's not just a local thing. This is a global issue. We are seeing violence happen from authoritarian spaces like policing or military happen all over the globe. And so for us, the fight when it comes to Black Lives Matter, particularly here, is the idea that in order for us to actually have a whole community, we have to invest in people. And so the best way to put this is, there was a lot of protests happening. When you think about so many Black workers, and I think when people go and they're around, they see people who are working at the store, and they're working at, a fast food spot, or they're working that working class job. There's usually this sort of judgment that comes up. Anyway, anytime you're doing work, we need to say that work is valuable. And so that person might not be getting paid a living wage. You combine that with the fact that they're struggling to pay rent. You combine that with the fact that, they might get stopped by the police as they're walking. You combine that with the fact that their school might have been closed down or is being closed down. You combine that with the fact that their hospital most likely was closed down or is going to be closed down. You combine that with the fact that their public transportation has been shut down or their station's been closed. So now their life is extremely difficult. And then you say, why don't you just figure it out? The question for us to say is that in order for folks to figure it out, it is not on them as an individual, but on all of us as a people. And so to me, this is not just a local issue. This is, again, a global fight. That the idea that if we see this, whether it's in Chicago, whether this is in New York, whether this is in Los Angeles, whether this is in Rio, wherever it might be in the world, it is a problem, and it will always have it, so that people are pitted against each other with talking points made by, the right wing on Fox News like Tucker Carlson, instead of realizing that if we come together, we'll be stronger, and that if we lift up even the weakest amongst us, we'll be able to fight back against those who try to divide us. So I know you might get this sort of, there might be people who hear the sort of black on black crime thing. There's a story that I will leave, and I can end on this, is there was the GI Bill. Folks came back from World War II. And in the GI Bill, the idea was that you would be able to go to college for free. You get your house basically, no interest. You'll get funding to get a house, and you'll get support, and you'll get veterans benefits for the rest of your life. Now, you served in World War II. You took on Hitler, right? You've now fought. You won. It was huge. It was written in there to prevent Black vets who took on Hitler, who fought Hitler, from benefiting from the GI Bill. That is a systemic question. And what does that have to do with quote unquote black on black crime? That says everything about the priorities this country has had. They'd rather you have to work with no wages, no schools, and terrible housing, even if you took on Adolf Hitler. So I think this is for us to sit in this tension, to let this turn, to learn, to come together, and to build something where everybody has a safe and just and beautiful community, no matter where they live, and where their burden is relieved from bootstraps that may not exist. So,
Thank you so much, Senator Peters, for that beautiful statement. I think many of us have felt everything that you sort of laid out, and have needed somebody like yourself to be able to put that into words, because you're right, we're totally used to hearing the right wing commentary and the tropes and the stereotypes, and part of the reason why we put together this organization was so that we can fight those stigmas and those narratives and characterizations. So thank you so much for putting it so beautifully and helping lay it out for those of us watching. We are at 7 o'clock. We want to be cognizant of your time, but is there anything else that that either of you would like to share with our viewers before we end?
Kevin, I just want to end with this. I'm such a proud Indian American, and I'm proud to be the first elected to the Illinois State Senate and the Illinois General Assembly. And again, I'm just honored to be a part of this conversation, and proud of the Malayale Indian American community for stepping up. And I would just ask people, to get out of your comfort zone, and talk to folks that are not like-minded, that are not in a potential bubble that you're talking to, and have those conversations and talk about their experiences, and think about our parents. My parents, my dad came here in 1975. He was a civil engineer from India. In India, my mom was a teacher. She came in 1976 with my brother, who was 2 years old, and they made $2.30 an hour for 3-4 years before they were able to go to school and get the jobs that they were trained in. And they struggled. And as we talked about, they had help from the government, from other families, other communities. I just think about their struggle. I think about the discrimination that my mom had and faced when she wore a sari to her job and her career. And English being a second language, even though she knew English from India, still they treated her differently. And then even I think about 9/11 and when that happened, and how you and me and other brown Indian Americans, South Asian Americans were treated, were looked at, we were randomly searched. And, I just think to myself and say, the Black community, Black men face that every single day. They've faced that type of struggle, that injustice to a much greater extent. And it's not to diminish our struggle as Indian Americans, but it's more to relate to it and to say, hey, we faced a similar struggle. Yours is more deep. given this country's history, given how you were brought here as an African American community. And we feel your pain, and we want to be there to help. We stand in solidarity. And to those that may not see eye to eye in our community, I would talk to them in that kind of channel and say, you all face this struggle. You face a similar struggle. That's what they're going through, but it's so deeper, and here's why. And that's why we need to stand with them. And so I would just leave that as a parting thought. But I'm just thankful for you all creating this organization and for having these conversations.
Well, no, thank you, Senator Villivalam. That was, again, extremely proud to have a South Asian leader like yourself who is speaking about these issues and in a position of power. We're at our time now. Thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time to be a part of this. Senator Robert Peters, Senator Ram Vilivalam, Senator Kevin Thomas. It's really amazing, one, to see elected officials who are supportive of the cause, but it's really amazing to have people like yourself who are of our generation. And so it really motivates us. It makes us really believe that we can fight for change. If people who share our values and from our generation are in positions of power. So thank you for being a part of this. And we promise to do our part to support you in your efforts so that, we can make these changes happen and make sure that this is not just another moment, that this is really the beginning of something different and something special. So thank you again, senators, for the time.
Thank you, Kevin. And I appreciate you not commenting on my lack of a haircut. I got to get to the barbershop. But maybe one day I want to grow a beard like you have, man. I mean, it's pretty nice.
Thank you. I appreciate that, sir. But
take it easy. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You guys have a good one.